I'm surprised the insurance company didn't sound an alarm, but it's not on the news. We're worried about people ripping us off on the news, you know. Nobody in the world is talking about, you know, that when it rains, like, it's crazy. This is gonna amaze you guys. This is really gonna amaze you. Drywall, insulation, okay, carpet, wood, okay, these products do not actually withstand rain. It's amazing. The bleeding to mitigate the damages. And it doesn't say that if it's a tornado and it's severe, that they don't have to mitigate the damages, right? So like, no matter, even if they don't know how, like they have to do whatever is in their power to stop the bleeding. So if a pipe busts in a wall and water's flowing through, it's up to the property owner to stop that water from coming out, okay? As soon as they find out about it. And so, you know, you think of a plumber is actually in the mitigation industry because they have to come out and stop the water. But ServPro, you know, or a company like ServPro that comes out and cleans up the water and takes up everything that's wet that they can't save and removes it. So you've seen probably where you come in, water damage claim has happened, the carpet's gone, the floor's clean, parts of the baseboard's gone. You see like a flood cut at the bottom of the drywall that's been removed. You know, that's mitigation, right? Everything had to be clean and the bleeding stopped. But when you come in, everything's dry and ready to be put back, okay? So, but also in mitigation, I mentioned it already, tarping, which I want to talk about in a moment, but then you think of wildlife pest control. I talked about that. We had a guest that, a couple of them now, at a couple of our events that do that. But when you're doing a roof and you find out that there's bats or a squirrel problem or raccoons or something like that, and somebody tells you about that, stop the press. Like, that's a big problem. That's mitigation. That needs to be fully remediated because those wildlife critters, they leave urine and feces. Okay, I want to get that out of the way first, so it's not so close to lunch. But that's their problem. So if they live there, it's toxic. It's extremely toxic. It has to be remediated. You have to have personal protection equipment, you know, respirators. You have to set up, you know, negative air scrubbers and other equipment. We need special chemicals to clean everything. Everything's got to be clean. The surface materials may need to be removed and replaced, right? Like, when I first heard that, I was like, really? I had no idea. I can't tell you how many times we just roofed out, you know, we just kept going. So that's a mitigation issue, right? But then you think of asbestos, removing old shingles or old siding that has asbestos. Again, stop the press. Everything's got to be contained. You know, you can't breathe that when it's airborne, so everybody needs to be protected. You know, you probably have to be certified to even work with it. You know, there are other things, but if you know, for sure, and if you don't have to be certified, just know everything has to be contained. All those materials have to be removed in hazardous material containers or bags. It has to be dumped a certain way, right? And so you think about mold, that's a mitigation part of the industry. Although I will tell you, I would never say mold. That's a bad word in my vocabulary. I never say mold, ever, okay? So like, you know, and I had a client once who did mold remediation. And he would bring jobs into me that he needed me to write the estimate. And he'd say, Chad, take it easy on this one. They have a $10,000 cap. So like mold sections of policies typically are capped at a certain number or have extremely harsh exclusions or limitations, okay? So if it's mold, what caused the mold? Like water damage, right? Water damage doesn't have any caps. So if you see mold, it's not mold, it's water damage. Like I was, Hurricane Ike, I'm standing in Galveston in someone's home where the seawater had previously been had flooded and been up to the ceiling, and we're looking at mold for all intents and purposes, and it looks like shrubbery, looks like coral reef or something, and it's really, it was so big. We have masks on, and I look at the adjuster and I say, wow, would you look at the extent of that water damage? And he laughed, because he doesn't want to turn it down. He wants to get paid. So it's not mold, it's water damage, right? But mold remediation, asbestos, those things, those are all part of the mitigation side, okay? But then, again, board up and tarping. Tarping is part of mitigation, okay? Now, I recently worked in Panama City with Hurricane Michael, the most recent, basically, hurricane that happened. And it was it was my 12th, I think. It was one of the worst that I've ever seen. I mean, extensive, 155 mile an hour plus wind. I mean, I've seen probably worse tornadoes, but not hurricanes. I was in Irma and keeping them together, Harvey then Irma. And I was there for those storms, like waiting for them to come, and lived through where there's no water, running water, electricity, like can't get coffee. I got sick in Harvey, and I decided that for the next hurricane, when Michael came, I wasn't going to go down there right when it happened. I was going to wait till later. I'm getting too old for this. I'm going down later, okay? So I went down about 2.5 weeks later, and I'm driving around just kind of surveying the area, looking at the damage, and it really looked like a third world country to me, like a war zone. And what was interesting was that the area I was looking at did not have a lot of flooding, okay? It did not have storm surge coming back up and filling up people's houses. It was mostly a lot of damage just from the wind. And there wasn't a lot of rain that came right after the storm, like right with the storm on the tail end. There wasn't an extensive amount of rain. So it was perplexing to me to drive down the streets and see piles of drywall, insulation, like rubble, right? Like wet stuff, just rubble. And cabinets and carpet and hardwood flooring and contents in piles out in front of every business, every home. And I thought, like, what is the problem? How did this happen? Well, it rained several times after the storm, okay? And you look at the property and you can see a common denominator. Those properties didn't have a tarp on the house or on the business, okay? Simple as that. Like, some of them did, but they were 2x2 patches of tarps, or an 8x8 tarp, or like 4x4 pieces of felt. Some of those felt emergency repairs, we'll call them, actually had the logos of the companies that put them on, like putting their names on their incompetence, okay? And I just say that because, listen, how much, first, how much does Xactimate pay to go out and put a 4x4 patch on a roof? Like, you can probably get an emergency services charge, a couple $100, and just so you know, like, there's during business hours, after business hours, anything outside of Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. through 5 p.m. is outside of business hours, after business hours, so it charges more. So maybe the emergency services call was on the weekend and you got a little extra, right? But how much do they get, how much does Xactimate pay for like 4x4 tarp? Well, Xactimate pays by the square foot, okay? So why are we doing that? Like, we're gonna get paid $8 to go and do a tarp, right? And plus $200? And what problems are we actually really solving? None, like, this is the thing, like, it's crazy to think that everybody in the whole community, all the experienced, licensed, and regulated contractors, I'm surprised the insurance company didn't sound an alarm, but it's not on the news. We're worried about people ripping us off on the news, Nobody in the world is talking about, that when it rains, like, it's crazy. This is gonna amaze you guys. This is really gonna amaze you. Drywall, insulation, okay, carpet, wood, okay, these products do not actually withstand rain. It's amazing. Like, when it rains, they can't hold up. They're not waterproof. It's amazing. So you get what I'm saying, right? Like, in these situations, the whole roof needs to be 100% tarped, okay? Now, let's bring that home to here, because we're not in Hurricane Michael, right? But if you have a hail damage claim, all right, even if it's a golf ball size or more, really more of a tell is, are there leaks coming inside from the hail damage? Like, do we have legit hail damage, okay? Did it hail on the whole roof? If it did, if we're gonna put a tarp on it, where do we start? Like, so for me, I'm gonna put a tarp on the entire roof because the insurance company is gonna pay for it every time. They're gonna pay for it every time. And when I put it on there, I'm gonna do the tarp, which includes the battens on the outside, and then I'm gonna charge for the lumber that goes around the perimeter, and I'm gonna tuck the tarp over top of that so that I create a proper water shedding effect and I don't cause more damage. And I'm gonna do it in such a way that I don't have more penetrations. If you rolled up on a Belfour job, like the leader of the insurance restoration industry worldwide, or even a Serpro, their franchise, you're gonna see the tarps are 100% covered on those jobs because they know, right, that the client has an obligation to stop the bleeding, mitigate the damages, and they also know that the insurance company is gonna pay for that easy. Why would the insurance company pay for that? Because they'd rather do that than to pay for that big pile of damage in the front of the yard for the drywall and the insulation and the carpet and the cabinets and all that, right? It's a no-brainer to me. Now, will the insurance company pay for all that? Yeah, they're gonna pay for it. They shouldn't, they don't have to, right? Because the client had the obligation to stop the bleeding. But in those situations, I usually don't see the insurance company getting into that fight. Usually, and there are exceptions for sure, but usually where the client didn't tarp anything, they're still going to pay for all that. They don't want to be called out on the news. But they shouldn't, they shouldn't. I mean, and somebody should be responsible for that. It's just to me, it's incompettent. Now, when I was a contractor, I remember working in Plano in a hailstorm, and it was significant hail damage. And I'm sitting there, and nobody else in the area, again, put a tarp on the roof. There's significant leaks coming inside. Nobody saw any leaks until the hailstorm came, you know what I mean? So logical, common sense stuff here for the most part. But nobody in this high, upscale neighborhood had any tarps on the roof. Everybody had shattered hail damage, but nobody had tarps on there. So I can remember signing up this elderly couple, and I'm sitting there at their kitchen table, and I'm like, well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get a tarp on this house. We're going to cover it up completely, stop all the, get it watertight, because if we put our name on this, we don't want to have any further problems, right? And I can remember the concern on that gentleman's face when he's looking at me. He's picturing, that he's going to have a blue roof, in his neighborhood. He's going to be the only one. And he's like, well, let me ask you, Chad, do you have to tarp the whole thing? Could you just tarp like the bad parts first? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Where would you like me to start? Where would you like me to start? So, look, I get that there are wind damage claims and there are only certain shingles missing in certain areas, and you don't have to tarp the whole roof. Or I get that there might have been a tree that fell on the backside, or you might be dealing with a flashing leak issue, right? And I get also that your next concern is, what if the insurance company comes out and doesn't want to pay for it and you cause further damage to the roof, right? Well, first, if you get there and the roof's already been approved, we don't have to worry about that, do we? If you're in a situation where the roof's already been approved and they have an estimate, not enough, right, obviously, but the coverage is there, then we don't have to worry about that. Other than that, we do have to sort of use our best judgment. We have to kind of use our best judgment as far as, but the rule of thumb is, are there leaks on the inside? Like, is it legit hail damage? Okay, like we're not chasing dreams here, but are there leaks on the inside? Now, if you're nervous and you're worried about that, wait for the insurance adjuster, okay? Simple solution, but certain times you can't do that. Like if there's holes in the roof and it's on the weekend and you see all this rain coming, you're gonna be justified in your decision, but always take 100 or more photos. You're like, 100 photos, right? Like you're gonna see, man, I take at least 300 photos on any job that I ever put my hands on, okay? And I store it, I send it, and I put it in my, you're gonna see like, well, how do you do that? Man, that's gonna clog up my camera phone, or that's gonna, how do you store it? How do you send that to the adjuster? We'll get to all that, we'll make it real easy. But that's part of the, I told you, hardcore documentation. I have to have the proof of every single thing that I do. You know, like if I'm inspecting the outside, it's front elevation, right elevation, rear elevation, left elevation, all other structures. Nothing on that property is going to escape my purview, right? Like every inch is getting hit, okay? So like if I'm looking at the front elevation, you know, and I'm on the left side of the building, then literally like top to bottom, left all the way to the right is getting covered, okay? Like every window, every downspout, the whole fascia, the whole soffit, every light fixture, you know, the brick, the siding, everything, the trim, everything that's there. It's not like, well, what do we got to look for, Chad? Is there a checklist? Yeah, everything, straight up, everything. The thresholds on the doors, the freaking mailbox. Like, people always miss the mailbox. It kills me. Like, I'm the notorious mailbox guy. Like, I gotta get them, you know, it's like, it helps me build rapport for the client. Like, look at your mailbox. Nobody looked at your mailbox? You know, like, if it's out on the front or whatever, look at the mailbox. And then also, I'm looking at everything. I'm looking at, you know, all the other stuff. It kills me how many people go to these appointments and they're there for like 10 minutes, you know, to sell it. They just want to sell it. And if you look at anything, you look at the roof. I mean, that's not the whole job. You got to look at everything. And that's going to help you sell it. The longer you spend there, you're going to be so thorough that you just complete the steps, it'll sell itself. And the thing too is to educate the client. Like, you have to be able to establish yourself as the expert, as the authority on this subject, right? And so you have to educate your client, asking them lots of questions. But in order to really do that, you have to complete a full-on investigation of all the facts. You know what I mean? Like, that's really how I look at it. You're tarping, to put a bow on that, when you're tarping correctly, you know, it's remove and replace tarp. And it is remove and replace, because if I'm doing the roof, I have to take it back off, right? And so, and it's not, you know, we also have like roofing hours for openings and all of the vents to seal those. We have steep charge, right? We all know what that is. High charge. We have, you know, dump trucks or single axle dump trucks, because there's going to be a lot of debris when you're cutting the wood and different things. And so you also have the labor, you know, additional labor. But it's really, you know, if you have a 30 square roof, you know, it's, instead of it being that couple $100 repair, you know, it could be, you know, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, depending on the specs of that, right? And it doesn't cost, you know, a heck of a lot to get that done, you know, so the profitability is there too. But more importantly than any of that, everybody's protected, okay? Like, you stopped the bleeding, you did your part, the insurance company's going to pay for it, and really the only thing you need is an emergency services authorization form. And that's what you guys already have now. You have access to it. Let me go pull that up so you can see that.